One of the big questions that keeps people from believing in God relates to evil. They ask how a good God can allow evil to exist. And when people of faith struggle to answer it, they conclude that a good God can't possibly exist. Do you have a solid answer to this question? If you don't, then I can promise you that you will in the next 40 minutes or so. Welcome to All Roads Lead to Rome. I'm Dr. Bickford, and this is episode 17. Today, we address the uncomfortable issue of evil. And the best way for you to combat evil at right this moment is to pull your car, your lawnmower, or your treadmill over, or whatever you're doing right now, and take 2 minutes to write a positive review of this podcast. This way, the evil one doesn't discourage us from continuing this effort. And please be sure to tell your Catholic curious friends and even your other friends about this podcast. It could be just what they're missing. The issue of evil is not a simple one, but it is an absolute deal breaker for so many people. So let's deal with this today, and let's start at the beginning. And the beginning is the question of, why did God create us? God doesn't need us. God doesn't become better because we exist. So why are we here? The Bible tells us that God created us to have a relationship with us, a relationship of holiness and love. But there's a catch. If I have no choice but to love God, then is it really love? Of course not. The only way it can be a relationship of true love is if I have the option of saying no. To have that option is to have free will. Is that a term you're familiar with? If not, it's a very important one to understand. So, God created us to be in a loving relationship, but for the love to be real, God had to give us the option of rejecting his love and choosing to follow our own path. That is free will. The whole story of the Garden of Eden is an explanation of this. To improve the odds in God's favor, Eden is set up so that if we follow the path of obedience to holiness, then we get to live in paradise and partake of the tree of life and live forever. Or we can reject God's love, choose to do what is literally the one thing we are told we can't do, and that is to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In eating that, death enters into existence, and we lose paradise. How long do you think it took Adam and Eve to choose to reject God? 100 million years? 11 minutes? My guess is that it didn't take long. And it wouldn't take long for you or me to do the same. This choice, this sin committed by them is called original sin. And we all bear it because it is the fundamental sin of human nature, and we're all plagued by it. So, once we reject God, we lose paradise and enter into a broken world of suffering and pain. Well, how long does it take for the first murder to be committed? Cain kills Abel in the second generation. And it's even worse because they were brothers, and the murder was committed due to jealousy and resentment. And things only get worse from there. Okay, that's one piece of this. There's another piece too. Before the creation of humanity, God created the angels. They are purely spiritual beings who exist in heaven. So animals are purely material beings. Angels are purely spiritual beings. Humans are a hybrid. We are material, but we are also spiritual. Not only are the angels purely spiritual beings, but they're also pure intellects. So everything an angel knows was known from the moment it was created. They don't have material bodies like we do, so they do not need to grow or mature or to learn. It's all there, all at once. And at the moment of their creation, they too were given free will and a choice to follow God or reject God. Tradition teaches us that as many as 1/3 of all the angels rejected God and were cast from heaven. The Catechism of the Catholic Church walks through this in paragraphs 391 to 395. They are called the fallen angels because they fell from heaven, and they are now known as demons because they serve Satan. An amazing telling of this is by John Milton, who first published his epic work Paradise Lost in 1667. He explores a fascinating concept. Not biblical, but this is fascinating. When the fallen angels met, once they got to hell, they realized that they had two choices. They could repent and submit to God and hope God takes them back, or they could continue to rebel and continue to lose to God. Satan then speaks and suggests that they have a third choice. He had gotten word that God was planning to create humans. So Satan suggested that rather than fight God again and lose again, they could go and mess with the integrity of God's creation. They all love the idea, elect him as their leader, and the rest is history. The way the whole story of Paradise Lost unfolds is so profound that people have been wrestling with its implications for almost 400 years now. It's a compelling read. But when you take human rebelliousness and the forces of Satan working to exacerbate it, you have one truly messed up world. Now, on a side note, you've probably heard of demonic possessions and exorcisms, and the church does engage in all of that, which is direct warfare with demonic possession. But these are rare. And to be honest, possession only happens when the person invites the demonic into their life. The more ordinary and daily spiritual warfare that you and I are engaged in involves things like resisting temptation, engaging in meaningful prayer, and participating in the sacramental life. It's very real. And paragraph 409 of the Catechism states this, quote, "The whole of man's history has been the story of our combat with the powers of evil," end quote. So, we have the bad things that we do that generates evil. We have Satan and his minions just trying to use us to thwart God's plan. How do we contextualize all of it? Well, there are a couple of pieces to the answer. And this may take a little bit, but stay with me. It's going to be very valuable to understand. The first is the realization that we do not have good and evil battling it out on an equal footing. That would be more like Star Wars, where you have the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force, and they're always doing battle with each other. The only way for that to work in religion would be for there to be a good God and an evil God, always at it with each other. St. Augustine, who died in the year 430, spent many years as a member of the Manichaean religion. And this is exactly what they believed. The good God and the bad God were about equally strong as each other, and there was no certainty as to how the war was going to come out. Augustine came to reject this, but he couldn't become a Christian until he was able to resolve the question of evil. If it isn't two different gods battling each other, then what do we have here? Augustine finally figured it out, and we have used his description ever since. And the easiest way to describe it might be to use an analogy. So think about temperature for a moment. We have hot and cold, right? Well, heat is a measure of energy in atoms. The more heat they have in them, the farther the electrons orbit the nucleus. The less heat they have, the closer the electrons get to the nucleus. There's no real maximum temperature that can be reached, but there is a theoretical one, which we only have a limited knowledge of. However, we do have something called absolute zero, which is the coldest possible temperature. At that temperature, there is minimal energy in an atom. And absolute zero is about 273 degrees below 0 Celsius and about 460 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. So it's really cold. But if we get technical with what is hot and cold, those words lose meaning. All we have are various gradations of heat. What is called the Planck temperature is the maximum heat, and then absolute zero is the minimum heat. So there's really no such thing as cold. There are just gradations of heat, and absolute zero is the complete absence of heat. Okay. Raise your hand if I've already lost you. Okay, you got you. Oh, wow, that many. Okay, well, just think of it this way. Cold is not the opposite of hot. It's just the absence of heat. Cold is not the opposite of hot. Cold is just the absence of heat. So, Augustine applied the same thing to good and evil. Evil is not the opposite of good. Evil is the absence of good. So, to use that analogy just a little bit more, we have the Blessed Virgin Mary, whom the Archangel Gabriel said was full of grace, meaning she had a maximum amount of good for a human being. The rest of us have various amounts of good, some more, some less. And then there is an absolute zero, a point of complete lack of good, and that is Satan. All right, I hope this helps. The reason this distinction is important is because it then means that we have to see evil in the world. When we see evil in the world, it's not a competing force against the good. It's not a good God versus bad God fighting it out over us. Instead, evil is a lack of good. For St. Augustine, this is how a good and omnipotent God can coexist with the presence of evil in the world. A good God would never create evil to compete with his good, but God gives free will, which means we can choose to be filled with good, or we can choose to have little good in our lives. And when we have only little good, it manifests to others as evil. Because my lack of good can lead to envy, jealousy, resentment, hatred, revenge, all kinds of bad things. My expression of my lack of good would result in evil for those whom I foist it upon. That is how evil exists. If everyone in a community chose to love God and live holy lives, there would be an abundance of good and very little evil would exist. When everyone in a community rejects God and follows their own desires, very little good exists, and the community is full of evil. To describe this in a more technical and theological way, we say that evil is a privation of the good. Not deprivation, although they kind of mean the same thing. It's a privation. Privation means lack of good or distortion of the good. So when you talk about evil at a cocktail party full of academics, you talk about it being the privation of good, and everybody will be duly impressed with your intellect. The Catechism says this in paragraph 311, quote, "Angels and men, as intelligent and free creatures, have to journey toward their ultimate destinies by their free choice and preferential love. They can therefore go astray. Indeed, they have sinned. Thus has moral evil, incommensurably more harmful than physical evil, entered the world. God is in no way, directly or indirectly, the cause of moral evil. He permits it, however, because he respects the freedom of his creatures and, mysteriously, knows how to derive good from it." The quote continues, but now it's quoting St. Augustine. "For Almighty God, because he is supremely good, would never allow any evil whatsoever to exist in his works, if he were not so all-powerful and good as to cause good to emerge from evil itself." End quote. Is all of this starting to come into focus? So when someone kills a child and we cry out, "Why would God allow this?" A more appropriate question is, how have we allowed ourselves to degenerate to the point where we have so little good in us that we will do such evil things? That's a harder question, because now we're pointing the fingers at us instead of God, but it's the more honest question. So, when you are asked, how can a good God allow evil? Your answer is, God gave us free will, and our failure to love God and live holy lives is a reflection of the evil we choose, not an evil that God created. Should I say that again? This is key. Write this down. God gave us free will, and our failure to love God and live holy lives is a reflection of the evil we choose and not an evil that God created. It is not part of God's active will that evil exists. Evil exists because we use our free will to reject God. The only good news is, as St. Thomas Aquinas really argued and has also become part of our doctrine on the issue, is that God can use evil in order to bring out a greater good. Aquinas argues this by citing a couple of biblical examples. The first is the example of Joseph in the book of Genesis. His brothers sold him into slavery out of jealousy for him. And after he goes through a terrible series of experiences, he eventually ends up saving them. And in Genesis 50, verse 20, he says to them, quote, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good," end quote. The other and even more profound example is the crucifixion itself. The greatest moral evil, the murder of the Son of God, became the means of humanity's redemption. If Jesus hadn't died, we wouldn't be redeemed. And as the Catechism states in paragraph 312, quote, "From the greatest moral evil ever committed, God brought the greatest good, the glorification of Christ and our redemption," end quote. Now, saying that good can come out of evil may sound like a cop-out, especially when you've been the victim of evil. But if you take time to really wrestle through this concept, you can come to see that there are many, many layers of meaning to it, and they get more and more profound the deeper you go. Now, Catholicism does not glorify suffering, but it does see meaning in it. Christ's passion transforms suffering into a path of redemption. In paragraph 1505 of the Catechism, it says, quote, "By his passion and death on the cross, Christ has given a new meaning to suffering. It can henceforth configure us to him and unite us with his redemptive passion," end quote. One of the great passages of the Bible about this is Romans 8:28, which says, quote, "We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose," end quote. It isn't just that good things work out for the good, but all things, the bad things too, can work out for the good as well. So, we know evil is actually a lack of good, and a lack of good is necessary because we have free will. Whenever we reject God, we end up doing the things that are selfish or hurtful, and that is evil. On top of that, we have the fallen angels who are now demons, and their goal is to mess with us as much as they can. Well, how do we deal with all of this in our daily life? The answer lies in the one thing that separates us from every other animal on the planet. What's the one thing that humans have that no other animal has? Besides credit card debt. It's the ability to use reason. We can think, analyze, discover, see beauty, share love, give sacrificially, and do a whole host of other things because we have the ability to think them through. So, we can think through what is good and what lacks the good. But because of free will, there's another part to this, and that is the will. What is the will? It's our desire. We desire things, and we do so for many reasons. Experiences from our childhood, our personal interests, our sense of what matters, our sense of what will give us pleasure, a sense of what we feel we deserve, and so on. And do you know what? Reason and will are in battle. We don't have a good God and an evil God doing battle over us. We have reason and the will doing battle within us. And in the history of philosophy and theology, we have two big ways of looking at this. In classical theism, also called epistemic realism, go back to episode 3 on faith and reason to get a better understanding of that. In classical theism, we see reason as how we are made in God's image. That's what makes us in God's image, our ability to use reason. And the journey of faith is to use reason to bend our will, to shape our desire in a manner that creates a holy life. In modern philosophy, undergirded by nominalism, again, go back to episode 3 for that, where we believe we define our own truth in life, there is a belief that will controls reason. To put it another way, there is an essence to what it means to be human, and then there is existence, which means we are actually alive. We exist. If essence comes first, as it does in classical theism, then there is an ideal to which the human life aspires to. And when you live, your existence, your goal in life is to work to shape your life according to that essence, or that standard of what it means to be fully human and to truly flourish. And for Catholics, that essence is holiness. But if existence comes first, then once you exist, which means you are born, then it is up to you to define what the essence of human life is going to be for you, and then you live it. Your life is a blank slate, and you can shape it however you choose to. If you've heard of existentialism, that's exactly what it is. For Catholics, essence comes first. There is an ideal for human life, and we are called to live according to it. If you've ever read St. Augustine's book, Confessions, it's a masterpiece of someone learning what the essence of the Christian life is and the deep struggles he goes through to conform his will and his life to it. It's one of the all-time classic books, and it's been around for 1,600 years. And if you read it, it's well worth the time. So, how do we use reason to bend the will? That would be the next question. Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's the subject of the next 2 episodes. You're now listening or watching episode 17. In episode 18, we'll look at something called virtue ethics. And in episode 19, we'll look at the 4 cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Everything will make so much more sense when you add those topics to this one and how it all starts to fit together. Hopefully this episode has brought a lot of clarity. If it's brought you concern over the subject of evil, then I would encourage you to remember how the story ends. Catholic doctrine teaches that evil will be definitively defeated. At the final judgment, Christ will separate the righteous from the wicked, as described in the separation of the sheep from the goats in Matthew 25. Hell is the eternal consequence of freely chosen separation from God. Heaven is what we call the beatific vision, perfect union with God. Purgatory, a uniquely Catholic doctrine, is a state of purification for those who die in grace but still need some healing before being ready for the beatific vision. And that affirms that God's justice and mercy do work together. So, when we encounter evil, we cannot blame God for it. God doesn't cause it. It's a result of our free will, yours, mine, and everybody else's, being exercised in a way that rejects God and lacks good. The spiritual life, the practice of spiritual disciplines, participation in the Mass, participation in the sacraments, all play vital roles in our conforming our will and our lives to Christ. The Catholic understanding of evil is a complex and actually hopeful one. Evil is not a created force, but a privation of good. It entered into the world through free will, misused, but it's permitted by God for the sake of the greater good. Christ's cross transforms suffering into redemption, and the Church equips believers to resist evil and to embrace God's grace. So ultimately, evil will be defeated, and the beatific vision awaits those who persevere in faith. As Paul writes in Romans 12:21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And you can, because Christ has already won. Okay, so what will be on the test today? God gave us freedom so when we choose to love him, it's a real choice, because the option exists to say no. Evil is not the opposite of the good, it's a lack of good. So when we lack good in our lives, we engage in evil. God gave us free will, and our failure to love God and live holy lives is a reflection of the evil we choose, not an evil that God created. On top of that, there are the fallen angels who also rejected God, Satan and his minions, and they prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls, as the prayer of St. Michael says. The way our spiritual struggle manifests is that it is a struggle between our ability to use reason and our will, which is made up of desires. There isn't a cosmic struggle between good and evil, but there is a struggle between our reason and our will in every one of us. So we need to use our reason to shape our will, to put it into conformity with Christ. We are called to learn virtue ethics, to develop stable habits of practicing the good, and not to give in to the selfish and hurtful aspects of the bad desires our will sometimes contains. Encounters with evil can be devastating, and for many people, they can be faith-destroying. But I have just shown an explanation of how it all works and on why evil exists despite the universe being created by a loving God. The remedy for evil is throwing ourselves and our lives into the arms of God. Gaining a deeper understanding of this is the journey you need to spend the rest of your life on. You will be tested, and you will be tempted. But don't let it cloud your understanding of a key fact of Christian life, and that is, all roads lead to Rome.